Jack wasn't expecting much when he decided to visit the old dusty spaceport for the day. As a mechanic, he worked on all sorts of ships, from rusty old cargo vessels to the latest alien tech. But business had been slow lately, and he was running out of ways to keep his shop open. There was barely enough work to keep him going, and the bills kept piling up. Jack had no choice but to take whatever job came his way. Walking through the spaceport, he noticed a sign for an incredible deal. A flashy advertisement on a nearby bulletin board caught his attention. It was an offer that was hard to believe. An alien ship, damaged, yes, but being sold at a ridiculously low price. The ad claimed the ship was top of the line, from a faraway galaxy. Most importantly, the ship was just sitting there, waiting to be repaired and brought back to life. The deal seemed too good to pass up. Jack's curiosity got the best of him, and he made his way to the trader who was offering the ship. The trader, a small, hooded figure with a thick accent, welcomed him with an odd smile. "You want to buy the ship? Very cheap. Needs fixing, but it is worth much more when it's working." Jack raised an eyebrow. The ship was listed at a price that was barely above scrap metal rates. There had to be a catch. "What's wrong with it?" Jack asked. The trader shrugged. "Not much. Needs a little TLC, some new wiring, and a bit of fuel. Easy work for a skilled mechanic like you, yes." Jack wasn't so sure, but his skepticism didn't stop him from agreeing. He had always wanted to work on something new, something different, and if it worked out, it could be the big break he needed. The trader led him to a docking bay where the ship waited. It was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. The ship had an odd, smooth design, sleek and futuristic, with curves that looked almost organic. It didn't resemble any of the standard ships he usually worked on. The exterior was scratched, with obvious signs of wear, and parts of the hull looked like they had been damaged in some sort of crash. Still, the ship had an aura of something special, as if it held secrets waiting to be uncovered. Jack hesitated for a moment before inspecting the ship more closely. The exterior wasn't the problem. It was the technology inside that intrigued him. He could almost feel the untapped potential. The ship was clearly alien, advanced beyond anything humans had built, but there was no harm in taking a look. After all, he was a mechanic, and this was his chance to prove he could handle the challenge. "All right," Jack said, finally making up his mind. "I'll take it." The trader smiled, handed Jack a set of keys, and quickly disappeared into the shadows. Jack was left standing alone in the docking bay, the ship looming before him like a puzzle waiting to be solved. The first task was to get the ship into his repair garage. Jack managed to get the ship's engine running, but just barely. As it hummed to life, it made strange, low noises, as if it were waking up from a long slumber. Jack chuckled nervously to himself. If nothing else, it was a unique project. The garage was small, cramped, and filled with the sounds of tools clanking and machines working. But it was Jack's space, his sanctuary. As he worked, the ship's strange features became more apparent. The panels were designed in a way that made no sense to him. There were sections of the ship that seemed to be constructed of some kind of material he didn't recognize, almost like living tissue, yet it was as sturdy as steel. "Just a little more work, and this will be running like new," Jack muttered to himself, though a part of him wasn't convinced. Something didn't sit right. The ship was strange, too strange to be an ordinary broken-down vessel, but he pushed the thought aside. He needed to focus on fixing it, not wondering about its origins. After hours of tinkering with the ship's core systems, Jack was starting to get tired. He had replaced several damaged parts, and the wiring was mostly repaired. But there was still one last section he hadn't tackled yet, the cargo hold. He had to make sure everything inside was secure before the ship could actually be flown. It wasn't until Jack opened the cargo bay doors that the real surprise came. At first, he saw only piles of what appeared to be discarded equipment. There were tools, crates, and various alien gadgets he couldn't make heads or tails of. But then, Just as he was about to close the doors and move on to the next task, a low growl echoed from the darkness. Jack froze. He blinked in disbelief. Out of the shadows, a pair of glowing emerald eyes gleamed at him. At first, he thought it was just a malfunction of the lights, but the growl grew louder. A shape emerged from the darkness, an alien feline. This creature was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It was large, with sleek, shimmering fur that seemed to change colors in the low light. Its eyes stared at him with a fierce intensity, and it bared its sharp teeth in a growl that sent a chill down his spine. "What the hell?" Jack muttered, his heart pounding. The feline stalked forward, its movements precise and graceful, like a predator on the hunt. Jack instinctively took a step back, unsure of what to do. He had never expected to find a creature in the cargo hold, let alone an alien one. But before he could react further, the feline hissed loudly, its tail flicking in annoyance. Jack was certain this was no ordinary pet. Whatever this feline was, it had been aboard this ship for a long time, and it didn't look like it appreciated being disturbed. All right," Jack said, his voice calm but unsure. "I'll get you out of here, just stop staring at me like that." But the alien feline wasn't having any of it. Instead of retreating, it let out another growl, a sound that made the hairs on the back of Jack's neck stand up. Jack stood frozen, staring at the alien feline in front of him. The creature's emerald eyes locked onto his with an intense, almost predatory gaze. It was larger than any cat Jack had ever seen, its sleek fur shimmering in the dim light. The growl it emitted sounded deep and menacing, making Jack's heart race. He slowly took a step back, careful not to make any sudden moves that might provoke it further. The feline's tail flicked restlessly, its sharp claws scraping against the metal floor as it padded closer. Jack could feel the tension in the air, thick with uncertainty. "Hey, easy there," Jack muttered, trying to sound calm. "I'm not here to hurt you." But the alien creature didn't seem interested in calming down. Instead, it gave another low growl, its fur bristling. Jack was beginning to wonder if he had made a huge mistake. He had thought the ship would be a simple repair job, but now he was dealing with an angry alien feline that had clearly been living aboard the ship for who knew how long. His eyes darted around the cargo hold, looking for anything that could help him. There were scattered tools, crates filled with strange alien equipment, and pieces of technology he didn't recognize. But nothing he saw could explain the presence of this creature. As Jack took another step back, he accidentally knocked over a crate. The loud clatter startled the feline, and it let out a loud hiss before retreating into the shadows, its eyes still fixed on him. Jack breathed a sigh of relief, but only for a moment. "What are you?" he whispered to himself. The creature was unlike any animal he had ever encountered. It had the appearance of a cat, but there was something otherworldly about it. The shimmering fur, the glowing eyes. It wasn't just a pet. There was something ancient and mysterious about it. Jack took a deep breath and looked around the cargo hold again. The room was a mess, but there was no denying that it was full of advanced technology. Alien gadgets and parts were scattered everywhere, some of them still humming faintly with power. It seemed like the ship had been abandoned for a long time, yet the systems inside were still partially functional. His curiosity got the better of him, and he cautiously stepped forward to inspect the crates. The alien feline remained hidden in the shadows, watching him closely, but no longer growling. Jack's mind raced with questions. How had this creature ended up on the ship? Why was it hiding in the cargo hold? He approached the nearest crate, its surface covered in strange markings. As he carefully pried it open, he found a series of delicate alien tools inside, nothing like the standard equipment he was used to working with. These tools looked like they belonged to a different era, their design far more advanced than anything humans had created. Jack gently picked up one of the tools, inspecting it with a mix of awe and confusion. The metal felt smooth, almost alive, and there were faint pulses of light running along its surface. It was clear that the ship had been part of something much bigger than he had imagined. A soft noise behind him snapped Jack out of his thoughts. He turned to see the feline cautiously approaching, its glowing eyes fixed on the tool in his hand. It didn't seem as hostile now, but Jack wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. The creature's body language was still tense, like it was preparing to pounce at any moment. Jack sighed and set the tool back in the crate. "All right, you're in charge here. I get it." To his surprise, the feline didn't growl or hiss. It just watched him, its eyes narrowing as it slowly approached. Jack took another step back, but this time, the creature didn't seem interested in attacking. Instead, it sniffed the air, then padded closer to one of the other crates. "What are you looking for?" Jack asked, genuinely curious. The feline paused, giving him a look that seemed almost like a challenge before continuing its inspection. Jack couldn't help but be fascinated by the creature. It wasn't like anything he had ever encountered before. The way it moved, the way it interacted with the ship, it was almost as if the feline had an understanding of the ship's systems, just as he did with mechanical work. As he continued to observe it, Jack realized that there was more to this ship than he had first thought. It wasn't just a broken-down vessel. It was a relic, a piece of advanced technology from a time and place far beyond his understanding. And the feline, despite its grumpy attitude, seemed to be an integral part of it all. Jack's mind raced. Was this ship some kind of ancient artifact? Was the feline guarding it? He didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear. The feline was far more important than just a simple creature. He slowly walked around the cargo hold, inspecting the various crates and equipment. As he did, he noticed that many of the items were marked with symbols he didn't recognize. They looked like a combination of alien writing and geometric patterns, some of which seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. He found another crate tucked away in a corner, and this one looked different from the others. It was smaller, almost like a chest, and it was sealed shut with a strange lock. Jack knelt down and examined it closely, running his fingers over the surface. The lock was intricate, unlike anything he had ever seen before. The feline, sensing his interest, padded over and stood beside him, its eyes flicking back and forth between Jack and the crate. It seemed to be waiting for something. Jack's fingers brushed against the lock, and to his surprise, it clicked open with a soft hiss. The chest's lid slowly lifted, revealing a small, glowing device nestled inside. The device was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It was circular, with intricate patterns etched into its surface, and it pulsed with an inner light. Jack couldn't explain it, but he knew this device was important. It felt like it held the answers to all of the questions swirling in his mind. The feline stepped forward, sniffing the device before giving Jack a look that seemed almost approving, as if it had been waiting for him to find it. Jack stared at the device, a sense of wonder filling him. This was no ordinary ship, and the grumpy alien feline wasn't just some random stowaway. It was a guardian, a protector of something far more significant. Jack's thoughts raced as he picked up the device, feeling its weight in his hands. Whatever the ship was, and whatever the feline's role in all of this was, Jack knew one thing for sure. His life had just taken a very unexpected turn. Jack sat on the cold floor of the cargo hold, still staring at the glowing device in his hands. The strange alien patterns etched into its surface pulsed softly, almost as if it were alive. Every time he shifted his grip, the light would change, responding to his touch in a way that was both mesmerizing and mysterious. The feline sat beside him, watching the device with an air of calmness that seemed out of place for such a fierce creature. Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. This ship, the feline, and now this device. It all felt like more than just a broken-down project. The ship wasn't just a ship, and the creature wasn't just a pet. There was something deeper here, something far more important than he had initially realized. He reached for the device with both hands, turning it over carefully. The glowing patterns seemed to shift again, like a coded message only the ship, or perhaps the feline, could understand. He couldn't make sense of it, but there was no denying that it was connected to the ship's power, to the feline, and maybe even to something much bigger. "All right," Jack muttered, breaking the silence. The feline's eyes shifted to him, its expression unchanged, but its attention now fully on him. "Looks like you're stuck with me, whether you like it or not." The alien feline tilted its head slightly, almost as if considering his words. Jack chuckled nervously. "I'm not sure what kind of deal I've gotten myself into, but I guess we'll have to work together." As if in agreement, or maybe just to prove Jack's point, the feline let out a low, grumbling noise and stretched out, its claws extending and retracting in a slow, deliberate motion. Jack sighed. There was no denying that this alien cat wasn't exactly the easiest companion, but it seemed to be just as much a part of this ship as the walls themselves. Jack stood up, still holding the device in his hand, and took a moment to look around the cargo hold again. He had to focus on getting this ship back into working order. He couldn't afford to waste time figuring out the feline's moods. "You want to help?" Jack asked the feline. Though he wasn't really expecting an answer, it was more of a rhetorical question. But to his surprise, the feline stood up and padded over to one of the control panels. It stopped and stared at it, its eyes glowing faintly, before swishing its tail impatiently. Jack blinked. He had no idea what it was doing, but it certainly seemed like it was trying to communicate. He walked over, cautiously setting the glowing device down on a nearby workbench. The feline followed him, stopping just a few feet away from the panel, its eyes now locked on the intricate alien controls. "Are you trying to tell me something?" Jack muttered. The feline's ears twitched slightly, as if it had heard his voice, but it didn't respond. Instead, it raised a paw and gently tapped the panel with a deliberate movement, as if activating something. The ship hummed quietly, and for a moment, Jack thought he imagined it. But then, the lights inside the cargo hold flickered on, casting a pale, soft glow across the room. The walls began to pulse with the same glow as the device Jack had been holding earlier. Jack's jaw dropped in surprise. You can control the ship?" he asked, the realization dawning on him. The feline didn't answer, of course, but it seemed to nod slightly in a way that made Jack feel as if the cat understood exactly what he was thinking. "This is crazy," Jack whispered to himself. But despite the situation's oddness, a sense of wonder filled him. There was no way this was just a simple repair job anymore. This ship, and this feline, were part of something far beyond what he had imagined. The feline moved away from the control panel, seemingly satisfied with whatever had just happened. It padded back toward the workbench, circling it as if to check if Jack was ready to get back to work. Jack watched the feline closely. "All right," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Looks like you're my partner now." He moved back to the control panel, eyeing the complex buttons and switches that seemed almost impossible to understand. But something in him, something in the ship, urged him to try. With a deep breath, Jack began to work. The feline sat nearby, its sharp eyes following every movement Jack made. It didn't make a sound, but its presence was almost comforting, like it was silently watching over him. For the first time in a long time, Jack didn't feel entirely alone. The ship, this feline, and the device, they were all part of something bigger, something that Jack was only beginning to understand. As Jack worked, he noticed that the ship's systems were slowly becoming more responsive. The lights brightened as he adjusted the controls, and the hum of the engines became stronger, more purposeful. It was clear that the ship was waking up, but there was still a lot to fix. Jack wasn't sure if he had the skill to repair everything. But with the feline's seemingly supernatural influence on the ship, he was starting to believe he might just be able to do it. But that didn't mean everything was going smoothly. The ship had many layers of complexity that Jack couldn't yet comprehend. There were strange markings on the walls, hidden compartments, and mechanisms he didn't know how to activate. It felt like he was opening a book with pages torn out. Still, with the feline's silent guidance, Jack pushed forward. His hands worked tirelessly on the control panels, connecting wires and adjusting circuits. The feline remained by his side, watching him intently but not interfering unless it seemed necessary. "Thanks for the help," Jack said after a while, though he wasn't sure if the feline understood. The alien creature didn't respond, but Jack could have sworn that it looked at him with something like approval. Maybe it wasn't so grumpy after all. Jack took a step back, wiping the sweat from his forehead. The ship was slowly coming to life, and he was starting to feel a strange sense of accomplishment. But this was just the beginning. There were still so many unknowns. What was this ship really for? Why had it been left in such disrepair? And what role did the feline play in all of this? With a deep breath, Jack stood tall, glancing down at his unexpected companion. "Looks like we got a long way to go," he said, and the feline gave him a look that almost seemed like a challenge. Whatever came next, Jack knew he wouldn't be facing it alone. As the days passed, Jack continued to work on the ship. He had become somewhat accustomed to the feline's presence, though it still had a knack for getting in his way. The creature had a calm, almost regal demeanor, and while it wasn't exactly friendly, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that it was guiding him in some strange way. It was like the feline knew the ship's inner workings better than he did, and sometimes it would nudge him toward certain panels or pieces of equipment, as if to tell him where to focus. Jack had learned to respect the feline's silent instructions, even if it still hissed at him from time to time. The ship itself had started to hum more steadily, and the dim, flickering lights were now glowing brightly. The systems were responding better, and the strange device from the cargo hold seemed to be helping too. Whenever Jack connected the device to the ship's core, there would be a sudden surge of energy, and the ship would pulse, as if waking up from a long slumber. But something else had started to happen, something Jack couldn't explain. It began on the third night of their work together. Jack was adjusting the wiring near the engine room when he heard a soft growl from behind him. He turned, expecting to see the feline pacing around, but what he saw instead made his heart skip a beat. The ship's walls were glowing faintly, as they always did when the feline interacted with the controls. But this time, the light was different. It was a deep blue, almost like the color of the sky on a starless night, and it seemed to move along the walls like a wave. It didn't make any sense. Jack hadn't touched anything, and yet the ship was responding on its own. The feline, however, didn't seem surprised. It was sitting near the control panel, staring at the shifting lights with an intensity that was almost expectant. Jack slowly stepped closer, unsure of what was happening. He reached out, his hand brushing against the wall, and to his surprise, the glowing pattern shifted, flowing around his fingers like water. "What in the world?" Jack whispered. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of it. This wasn't just a broken ship. It was alive in a way he hadn't imagined. The ship seemed to respond to his touch, almost as if it were alive, like it recognized him. The feline gave a low, approving sound, and Jack could have sworn that it was smiling, or at least it seemed more relaxed than usual. He stepped back, feeling a mixture of awe and confusion. The ship wasn't just responding to the feline, it was responding to him now too. "Are you telling me the ship is alive?" Jack muttered. The feline tilted its head, as if it understood the question. It blinked slowly, then padded over to the glowing panel, tapping it with its paw. Jack stared, his mouth dry. The walls continued to pulse with that strange blue light, and Jack could feel the ship's energy growing stronger. He had read stories about alien technology, about ships that were more than just machines. But this was something entirely different. It was as if the ship was a living entity, and the feline was its guardian. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the control panel, following the feline's movements. He pressed a button, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, the ship shuddered, and the lights in the room grew even brighter. The strange blue light filled the entire cargo hold, and Jack could feel a deep hum vibrating through the air. It was almost as if the ship was speaking to him, though he couldn't understand what it was saying. The feline jumped back, its fur standing on end. It looked at Jack with wide, curious eyes, then turned to the panel as if to say, "It's your turn now." Jack swallowed, his heart racing with excitement and fear. He had no idea what he was about to do, but the ship seemed to be waiting for him. The feline's unspoken guidance, the ship's growing power, it was all pointing to something. But what? With a deep breath, Jack touched the glowing panel again, this time more confidently. The ship responded instantly, a surge of energy rushing through the room. The walls pulsed even more brightly, and Jack felt the air grow warmer, filled with an almost electric energy. The lights above flickered as the ship's systems powered up. Then, a strange noise echoed from deep within the ship, a low, humming sound that seemed to reverberate through the very structure of the vessel. Jack stepped back, his eyes wide. It was as if the ship had just awakened, stretching its metaphorical limbs, ready to move. The feline, now more alert than ever, stood beside Jack, its eyes glowing. It seemed to be waiting for something. Jack, still processing the strange events, could hardly believe what was happening. The ship was alive. It had power, ancient and unknown, and it was now responding to him. A sudden beep from the console broke his thoughts. The ship's navigation system had come online. On the screen, a series of coordinates appeared. Coordinates that Jack didn't recognize, but they seemed to lead to a far-off part of the galaxy. The location felt important. "Is this it?" Jack asked, looking down at the feline. "Is this where we're going?" The feline didn't answer, of course. It simply watched him, its eyes sharp and focused. But Jack could feel it. This was no accident. The ship had purpose, and he had been chosen to help guide it. Without thinking, Jack pressed the button that would confirm the coordinates. The ship rumbled, and he felt the vibrations in his chest. It was like the entire vessel was preparing to move, ready to take flight. But before it did, Jack turned to look at the feline. "You're coming with me, right?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The feline flicked its tail, then padded over to the nearby control panel, as if signaling that it was time to begin. Jack smiled. Somehow, he knew that this was just the beginning of something incredible. The ship shuddered again, this time with more force. Jack quickly secured his tools and made sure everything was in place. The feline settled next to him, its gaze fixed on the navigation screen. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the ship's engines roared to life, and the glowing lights flared brighter than ever. Jack took one last look at the feline. It nodded once, as if to say, "Let's go." And with that, the ship surged forward into the unknown, carrying Jack and his mysterious companion into a new adventure. The ship's engines hummed steadily as it moved through the vast emptiness of space. Jack sat in the cockpit, watching the stars streak by outside the viewports. The feline, now seated beside him, gazed out into the void with an intensity that made Jack wonder what it was thinking. The ship had come to life, and he was now on a path he had never expected, heading to some distant, unknown place. The coordinates on the navigation screen had led them farther than Jack had ever traveled, beyond the familiar star systems he knew so well. This was uncharted territory, an area that even the most experienced pilots avoided. Jack's curiosity mixed with a sense of excitement and unease. He had no idea what he was heading into, but the feline seemed confident, as if it had seen this journey before. As they continued, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he was missing. Something important about the ship, about the feline, and about why they were here. He glanced at the creature sitting beside him. The feline had barely spoken, but its presence seemed to carry more weight than any words could. The bond between them had grown, and Jack felt that they were connected by more than just a shared mission. "All right, little buddy," Jack said softly, breaking the silence. "What exactly is going on here?" Why did you bring me along for this ride?" The feline turned its head to look at him, but didn't answer. Instead, it stood and padded over to a small compartment near the control panel. Jack watched as it nudged open the door with its paw, revealing a hidden drawer. Inside was an old, worn-out book, something Jack had not seen before. He furrowed his brow as he picked it up. The book was in a language Jack didn't recognize, its pages yellowed and fragile. He opened it slowly, turning the pages carefully, trying not to damage it. The text was written in elegant flowing script, and illustrations filled the margins. There were strange symbols, maps of star systems he didn't recognize, and images of alien creatures, some of which looked remarkably like the feline beside him. Jack flipped through the pages, his fingers tracing the lines as he tried to make sense of it. At first, it seemed like gibberish, but then he found a page that seemed to stand out. It depicted an ancient civilization, a race of beings who had mastered advanced technologies far beyond anything Jack could imagine. The creatures in the drawings looked similar to the feline, but they were larger, their fur shimmering with a kind of energy that seemed to radiate from within. The feline, as if sensing Jack's discovery, padded over and looked at the page he was focused on. Its eyes narrowed slightly, and it let out a low sound that almost sounded like a purr. Jack looked at the creature, his mind racing. He had a feeling that this book, this ancient text, was key to understanding everything. The feline had been guarding it for a reason. "Is this your history?" Jack asked, his voice soft with reverence. The feline didn't respond, but it did seem to study the page with more interest. Jack turned the page, and what he saw next made his heart skip a beat. There, on the next page, was an image of a ship. It was a massive, majestic vessel, its design more intricate than anything Jack had ever seen. The ship was surrounded by strange symbols and a map of distant stars, but what caught Jack's attention the most was the writing beneath the image. It seemed to describe the ship's purpose, a vessel of immense power, capable of reshaping the galaxy. This is it, isn't it?" Jack whispered. "This ship, this is what we're in. This ship was built for something much bigger." The feline's eyes glowed brighter, and it let out a soft chirp, almost like an affirmation. Jack felt a sudden chill run down his spine. The ship was not just an ancient artifact. It was a weapon, or perhaps a tool, of unimaginable power. And now it seemed that he had unknowingly become a part of something much larger than he could have ever imagined. As Jack continued to read, the story of the ancient civilization unfolded. It spoke of a race that had once been the rulers of the galaxy, their knowledge and technology far surpassing anything Jack had ever heard of. But something had gone wrong. A great war had torn through the galaxy, and the civilization had fallen. The ship, this very ship, had been built as the last hope, a vessel designed to carry the knowledge and power needed to restore balance. But the ship had been lost, hidden away by the last surviving members of the ancient race, and the feline. It was not just a guardian, it was a protector, one of the last of its kind, entrusted with the ship's secrets and its power. Jack's fingers trembled as he closed the book. The truth was beginning to dawn on him. The ship, the feline, and the mysterious device. It was all part of something ancient, something that had been waiting for the right person to unlock its secrets. But the question remained, why had it chosen him? The feline sat back, watching Jack intently, as if waiting for him to piece it all together. Jack leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. This was no longer just a simple repair job. He had been chosen for something, and the feline had guided him to this point for a reason. But what was that reason? Suddenly, the ship shuddered and the lights flickered. Jack looked at the navigation screen, and the coordinates had changed. They were no longer headed for the distant star systems they had been traveling toward. Instead, the ship was moving in a new direction, closer to a large, dark planet that Jack had never seen before. "What's going on?" Jack asked, his voice filled with both awe and fear. The feline's ears twitched as it jumped up, and padded over to the control panel, its eyes focused on the screen. Jack watched as it tapped a few buttons with its paw, and the ship's systems responded immediately. The ship was moving faster now, its speed increasing as it headed straight for the planet. Jack's heart raced. Whatever was waiting for them on that planet, it was clear that they were about to face something significant. The ship had brought them here for a reason, and now Jack would have to prepare for whatever came next. As the planet grew larger on the screen, Jack glanced at the feline once more. It gave him a look that seemed to say, "We're ready." Jack nodded, his grip tightening on the controls. He didn't know what awaited them, but one thing was certain. This was only the beginning. Whatever secrets the planet held, Jack and his unlikely companion were about to uncover them together. The planet loomed larger and larger on the navigation screen, its surface covered in swirling clouds and deep, mysterious oceans. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something important and dangerous was waiting for them there. The ship had increased its speed, heading toward the planet with a force that felt almost deliberate, as if the ship itself was guided by an ancient, unseen hand. Jack glanced over at the feline, who was sitting calmly beside him, eyes fixed on the screen. The creature had been quiet for the past few hours, but now it seemed alert, its ears flicking with every small sound in the cockpit. It looked almost like it was expecting something, like it knew what was about to happen. Jack couldn't help but wonder just how much the feline knew. It had been with this ship for so long, and it seemed to understand its purpose far better than he did. For the first time, Jack felt like he was no longer in control. The ship, the feline, the mysterious device, everything was happening around him, and he was just along for the ride. "Hold on," Jack muttered to himself as he adjusted the ship's course. The planet was rapidly approaching, and he could see the first hints of its surface, dark and stormy, beneath the thick clouds. There were no signs of civilization, no structures, just endless stretches of wilderness and stormy skies. The ship was heading toward a massive mountain range, towering and sharp against the planet's landscape. Without warning, a warning signal blared from the console, cutting through the silence of the cockpit. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he looked at the screen, his eyes narrowing in confusion. The ship's sensors were detecting something large and fast, moving directly toward them. It wasn't just a random object, it was a ship. "What the?" Jack muttered under his breath. The feline's ears perked up at the sound of the alarm. It stood, its fur bristling, and walked over to the console. It stared at the screen, its glowing eyes narrowing with recognition. Jack had never seen the creature so serious before, and it only increased his sense of unease. The ship on the screen was closing in quickly, and it wasn't just drifting aimlessly. It was coming straight for them. Jack's pulse quickened. Whoever, or whatever, was in that ship was targeting them. He had no idea who these people were or what they wanted, but one thing was clear: they weren't friendly. "Brace yourself," Jack said to the feline, even though he wasn't sure if the creature understood. It padded silently back to its place next to him, its tail flicking anxiously. Jack's hands flew over the control panel, trying to get a better read on the incoming ship. The sensors confirmed his worst fear. The ship was heavily armed. Jack gritted his teeth, his fingers tapping quickly against the controls. There was no way he could outrun them, not with the speed this ship was currently set to. He needed a plan. Fast. As he worked, the feline suddenly let out a sharp, loud hiss. It jumped up and ran to the back of the cockpit, staring out the rear window. Jack followed its gaze and saw another ship, this one even larger, emerging from behind the first one. The ships were surrounding them. "They've got us trapped," Jack muttered, his stomach dropping. He frantically started to flip switches, trying to activate the ship's defenses. But before he could do anything, the ship jolted violently. Jack was thrown forward against the controls, and he struggled to regain his balance. The feline had taken a more defensive stance, its eyes locked onto the screen. Come on," Jack shouted, trying to steady the ship. Another jolt hit them, and this time the lights flickered. Something had hit the ship. Hard. His heart raced as he tried to pull them away from the incoming attack, but the ship seemed to have a mind of its own, resisting him at every turn. A booming voice suddenly crackled over the communication system, deep and threatening. The words were in a language Jack couldn't understand, but the tone left no doubt about the intentions of the speaker. He could feel the tension rising in the air as he sat frozen, trying to make sense of what was happening. The feline growled softly, its fur standing on end. It didn't look scared. If anything, it seemed ready for a fight. Jack had a feeling that the creature had been in situations like this before, but that didn't mean he had any idea how to handle it. "What now?" Jack muttered. The voice on the speakers grew louder, and Jack could hear the faint sounds of energy weapons charging up, a low hum that made the air vibrate. It was clear these strangers didn't want to negotiate. They wanted to destroy him and take the ship. His hand hovered over the weapons control, but just as he was about to fire, a new signal flashed on the screen. It was a transmission, but it wasn't from the ship targeting them. It was from another source, something far more familiar. Jack's eyes widened as he saw the familiar coordinates flash before his eyes. The location of the ship's original owners. The feline's reaction was instant. It leaped forward, almost knocking Jack out of his seat, and pawed at the screen. The ship's systems seemed to recognize the signal, and the lights inside the cockpit brightened again. Jack looked at the coordinates and realized what was happening. "They're after the ship," Jack said, his voice tense. "They want it for themselves." The feline's eyes glowed even brighter, and its tail flicked sharply. Jack could feel the tension in the air as the ship began to change course on its own, its engines powering up in response to the incoming threat. It was as if the ship knew exactly what it had to do. Suddenly, the ship lurched forward with a burst of speed, faster than Jack had ever seen it move. He could hardly hold on to the controls as the ship rocketed into space, leaving the hostile ships behind. The feline's growl deepened, and Jack could feel the ship's pulse steadying as it entered the safety of a nearby asteroid field. "What the?" Jack gasped, gripping the controls as the ship weaved through the rocky debris. The attack ships were still behind them, but the ship had a speed and maneuverability Jack didn't know it had. The feline seemed to guide the ship with its presence, as if it knew this was the only way to escape. The danger wasn't over yet, but as the asteroid field gave them some distance, Jack realized that the real battle was just beginning. Whoever those ships were, they weren't going to let go of this ship easily. But Jack wasn't going to give up either. He had a feeling that with the feline and the ship's mysterious powers, they had a chance to survive whatever lay ahead. The feline's growl turned into a low purr, and Jack knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. The ship's engines hummed steadily, and the asteroid field outside the viewport was a blur of rock and debris as Jack carefully piloted the vessel through the narrow gaps. The feline sat beside him, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the cockpit. There was a sense of calm that Jack couldn't quite explain, even in the middle of the chaotic escape they had just made. It was almost as if the ship itself had taken over, responding to the feline's presence, guiding them through the perilous maze of asteroids like it had done this 1,000 times before. Jack's hands were steady on the controls, but his mind raced. He had been so focused on escaping the attackers that he hadn't had time to think about what all of this meant. The ship, the feline, the strange device, they were all connected, and he was now a part of something bigger than he could have ever imagined. "Where are we going now?" Jack asked quietly, though he wasn't really expecting an answer. The feline had not spoken since they had escaped the attack, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that it knew exactly what was going on. The creature was more than just a companion. It was a protector, a guardian of this ancient ship. The feline's ears twitched, and it padded over to one of the control panels, its sharp eyes scanning the buttons and switches. Jack watched, fascinated, as the feline's paw hovered over a button, pressing it with the precision of someone who had done this 100 times. The ship's engines powered up, and the asteroid field grew smaller in the viewport. The feline had set a course. "All right, I guess you've got a plan," Jack said with a half-smile, feeling oddly reassured by the feline's actions. It seemed like the ship had a will of its own, but it wasn't just randomly moving. It was responding to something, perhaps the ancient technology embedded in its systems, or maybe even the feline itself. Whatever the case, Jack had to trust it. The ship's path cleared as they left the asteroid field behind, and Jack's eyes widened as the stars ahead opened up into a vast, open space. It was like the ship was leading them to something important. Suddenly, the communication system came to life with a faint crackling sound. Jack froze, his fingers instinctively hovering over the controls. The voice that came through was unfamiliar, harsh, and demanding. "This is your final warning. Return the ship to us, or face the consequences." Jack's heart skipped a beat. The voice sounded like it came from the same attackers they had escaped. They had found them again. "I knew this wasn't over," Jack muttered to himself, his eyes scanning the ship's control systems. The feline, still calm as ever, looked up at him, its eyes glowing brighter than before. It seemed to know that things were about to escalate, but it didn't seem worried. In fact, it almost seemed confident. "Do you have a plan?" Jack asked the feline, though he had no real expectation of a response. The feline simply padded over to the console, its eyes fixed on the blinking lights and symbols on the screen. Without hesitation, it pressed several buttons in quick succession. The ship's shields flickered to life, and Jack felt the energy in the air shift. The attackers had come closer, and Jack could see their ships on the radar. There were 3 of them, and they were closing in fast. Jack gritted his teeth, gripping the controls tightly. "You really think you can protect us?" he asked, more to himself than the feline. The creature's eyes flicked toward him, and for a brief moment, Jack thought he saw a glimmer of something. Determination, perhaps. Then it turned back to the control panel, as if to say, "Leave this to me." Suddenly, the ship surged forward with incredible speed, faster than Jack thought possible. The attackers were caught off guard, unable to react quickly enough as the ship shot forward, darting through the stars with a precision and agility that made Jack's heart race. "What is this thing?" Jack breathed, his eyes wide with awe. The feline gave no answer, but the ship seemed to almost hum with energy, as if it were alive. Jack could feel it in his bones. The ship was more than just a machine. It was something ancient, something powerful, and it was ready to fight. The first of the enemy ships opened fire, its weapons lighting up the dark expanse of space. Jack barely had time to react before the ship's shields flared up, absorbing the energy blasts with ease. The ship didn't falter. It didn't even slow down. Jack's hands were shaking, but the feline remained calm, watching the battle unfold with an almost detached interest. "Let's see what you've got," Jack muttered, his eyes focused on the controls. He pulled back on the throttle, causing the ship to barrel roll out of the way of another blast. The enemy ships were faster, but the feline knew how to guide them through the chaos, navigating the ship with a skill that was both terrifying and impressive. Another blast hit, but the shields held firm. Jack grinned, feeling the surge of adrenaline. This ship was more than just a tool. It was a weapon, and it was now his to control. The feline padded over to the communications panel, its paw gently pressing a button. Jack could hear the faint static of the incoming message, and when it cleared, a voice came through. This time, it was panicked and desperate. "You think you can outrun us? This ship belongs to us." Jack's eyes narrowed. The voice sounded like the same one from before. He didn't know who these people were, but it was clear they weren't going to stop. "We'll see about that," Jack said, his voice steady as he adjusted the ship's course once again. With the feline guiding him, he took the ship into a sharp dive, weaving through a series of nearby asteroids and debris. The enemy ships struggled to keep up, their weapons firing wildly as they tried to match the ship's speed and agility. Jack's heart raced as he pulled the ship into a sharp turn, narrowly dodging another blast. The feline's calm presence by his side made him feel like he could take on anything. The enemy ships were falling behind. Jack could see them losing ground on the radar. They weren't going to win this battle, not with the ship's power and the feline's guidance. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the attackers were gone. The ships broke off, their weapons falling silent. Jack exhaled deeply, his hands still gripping the controls, though his body was now relaxed. The feline padded over to him and sat at his side, its gaze focused on the now empty space where the enemy ships had been. Jack smiled, the adrenaline of the chase still pumping through his veins. "Well, that was fun," Jack said, looking down at the feline. "I guess we make a pretty good team, huh?" The feline blinked slowly, and Jack could almost swear it was smiling. With the threat behind them, Jack's thoughts turned to the future. They were still far from understanding what the ship truly was, or the purpose it served. But for the first time since all this began, Jack felt a sense of hope. The ship was more than just a mystery. It was his key to something bigger. And with the feline by his side, he knew they would face whatever came next together. As the stars stretched out before them, Jack couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning.